Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. Fireworks lit up the summer sky, but all Ethan Briggs could see was the way Cassie's eyes flickered to the man in the corner. The man with the easy smile and the confident lean, Devin. The barbecue was supposed to be a celebration. Neighbors laughing, kids playing tag in the yard, and Ethan flipping burgers on the grill. But underneath it all, there was an edge to the night he could not shake. Cassie's laughter sounded different, sharp, too bright. Every time she brushed past Devin, Ethan noticed the way her hand lingered just a little too long. His Navy SEAL training had taught him to spot threats in the most peaceful settings, and tonight, he saw one clear as day. The threat was not an armed intruder or a hidden bomb. It was his own wife. "Hey, Ethan," Cassie called out, waving a plate in the air. "We need more ketchup out here." Ethan forced a grin and turned back to the grill, but his mind was racing. His hands worked automatically, flipping burgers, stacking buns. He was trained to stay calm under fire, but this was a battle he never expected, one he never wanted. He watched Caleb, their 6-year-old son, chasing sparklers with the other kids. His laughter was pure, a bright spark in the night. Ethan clenched his jaw. No, he thought. I will not let her destroy this. As the party carried on, Ethan felt the weight of every stolen glance and every hushed word. The American flag hung above the porch, proud and strong, but to Ethan, it felt like a lie tonight. He would not say anything yet, but he would remember. Every glance, every laugh, every touch. Later, as the last of the guests left and Cassie kissed Ethan goodnight, he held her just a little too tightly. "Good night, Cassie," he whispered. She flinched, just barely, but he saw it. The cracks in the American dream were there, and Ethan was ready. He would find the truth, and when he did, he would make her regret it. What was she hiding behind those soft eyes and bright smiles? Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated with our latest stories. The next morning, Ethan woke early. The sun had not yet reached the windows, but he was already dressed and moving. He could not sleep with that image in his mind, Cassie's hand brushing Devin's arm, lingering in a way that made his skin crawl. He made breakfast for Caleb, pouring syrup over the pancakes just the way his son liked. Cassie came down in her robe, hair still damp from her shower. "Morning," she said, kissing him lightly. Her lips were warm, but he felt nothing but cold. "Morning," he replied. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Inside, his thoughts were a storm. "Ethan, can you take Caleb to the park later? I have some errands to run," Cassie said. She reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind his ear. Her touch was gentle, practiced, like a lie she had rehearsed too well. "Of course," he said. But in his mind, he was already following her steps. Every errand, every excuse, he would track them all. He had spent his life uncovering hidden threats overseas. Now, his own home had become the battlefield. At the park, Ethan watched Caleb climb the jungle gym. His little boy's laughter cut through the tightness in his chest. "Mommy's working?" Caleb asked, swinging his legs back and forth. "Yeah, buddy. Mommy's busy," Ethan said, forcing a smile. But his eyes never stopped scanning. He was not just watching his son. He was watching every lie Cassie might be telling. When they got home, Ethan noticed a new perfume on Cassie, something floral and expensive, something he had never smelled before. "Nice scent," he said, raising an eyebrow. Cassie's eyes widened. Then she shrugged it off. "Oh, just a gift from a friend," she said too quickly. "Which friend?" Ethan pressed, his voice soft but sharp. Cassie laughed, but it did not reach her eyes. "A friend from yoga class," she said. Ethan said nothing more, but he saw the way her fingers twitched as she set down her coffee cup. He saw everything. This was no ordinary affair, and Ethan knew it. He would watch, he would wait, and he would strike when she least expected it. Was she ready for the consequences of her secrets? That night, Ethan could not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every smile, every glance, every hushed word. The bed felt cold, even with Cassie sleeping beside him. She shifted in her sleep, murmuring softly, "Someone else's name?" He was not sure, but it was enough. At dawn, he got up quietly and went for a run. The cold air bit at his skin, but it cleared his mind. He had faced death in far-off deserts and in the crushing blackness of the ocean. But this betrayal, felt worse than any battlefield wound. When he came back, he found Cassie sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, startled. "You are up early," she said with a bright smile. "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice low. "Could not sleep." Cassie nodded, but her eyes flickered away. "I am meeting a friend for coffee," she said, almost too casually. "Do you mind watching Caleb for a bit?" Ethan watched her carefully. "Of course," he said again, but his mind was already racing. He waited until she left, then he sat down with his coffee. He stared at the door she had just walked through. "A friend," he whispered. "Always a friend." Later, he checked her laptop, an email from Devin. "I miss you," it said. Simple, intimate. Ethan's hands shook, but he forced himself to read every word. Every betrayal was a cut, but he would not look away. When Cassie came home, she smelled like Devin's cologne, faint, but there. She kissed Caleb's forehead, ruffled his hair, and looked at Ethan with those soft eyes. "How was your day?" she asked, her voice sweet as poison. Ethan smiled back, calm as still water. "Good," he said. "Just thinking." She frowned, but he turned away. He would not let her see the storm inside him. Not yet. What was she willing to sacrifice for her secrets? Ethan woke before the alarm, his mind already racing. He moved through the house like a ghost, his footsteps quiet on the wooden floorboards. The air was heavy with something unspoken, something that pressed on his chest every time he looked at Cassie. At breakfast, he watched her laugh with Caleb, her eyes bright, her voice light. If he did not know better, he would have believed it. But he did know better. He saw the way she flinched when he reached for her hand, the way she tucked her phone away when she thought he was not looking. He dropped Caleb off at school and then drove out to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed against the rocks, wild and relentless. He stood there, breathing in the salt air, feeling the cold wind cut through him. This was where he made his decisions, where he found his clarity. Out here, he was still the man he had always been, a warrior, a protector, someone who never backed down. He called Mark from the cliffs. "I need a favor," he said. His voice was calm, but underneath it, there was steel. "Say the word," Mark replied. He did not ask questions. He knew this was not about trust. It was about loyalty. "I need to know everything about Devin. Who he is, where he works, who he answers to," Ethan said. "Consider it done," Mark said. "You are not alone in this, brother." Ethan ended the call and stared out at the endless sea. The horizon was just a thin line, a promise of something beyond the lies and the betrayal. He would get to the truth, no matter how deep he had to dig. When he got home, Cassie was in the kitchen, humming to herself. She turned and smiled at him, her eyes soft. "Long day?" she asked. Ethan nodded, his own smile polite and distant. "You could say that." She moved closer, but he stepped back. "I am going for a run," he said, already pulling on his jacket. Cassie watched him leave, her expression unreadable. Ethan knew she was hiding something, but he also knew this. Whatever she thought she was protecting, he would expose it all. Ethan's run was not about exercise, it was about focus. The steady rhythm of his feet pounding the pavement cleared his mind, narrowed his thoughts to a single point. He could not afford to let anger blind him. He had to be sharp, controlled, ready. When he returned, Cassie was on the phone in the living room. She spoke in a low voice, but he caught fragments. Laughter, soft words, names he did not recognize. She turned away when she saw him, her smile tight. "Who was that?" he asked, his voice even. "Oh, just Rachel from yoga," Cassie said quickly. Too quickly. Ethan let it go, but he saw the way her fingers tightened around the phone, the way she would not meet his eyes. It was a small slip, but it was enough. She was lying, and she knew that he knew. Later, as they sat down for dinner, Cassie reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I have been thinking, she said, her tone too casual. Maybe we should plan a weekend away. Just us. Ethan looked at her, really looked. The softness in her eyes was practiced, a mask she wore to keep him from seeing the truth. Sure, he said. That sounds nice. She smiled, but he could see the relief in her eyes. She thought she was in control. She thought he was still the trusting husband, the man who would never question her. But she was wrong. After dinner, Ethan sat at his desk, pulling up the bank statements Mark had sent him. Devin's name was there, linked to Cassie's, transfers, deposits, things she had never mentioned. Each line was a betrayal, each number a cut. He printed out the statements, laying them on the table like evidence at a crime scene. Because that was what this was, a crime against his trust, against his family. He would not confront her yet. Not until he had everything. Because when he did, he wanted there to be no doubt left at all. The next morning was bright and cold. Ethan stood in the driveway, watching as Cassie backed the car out. Her smile practiced, her wave too cheerful. He waited until she was gone, then slipped into the garage and opened the safe where he kept the small recorder Mark had given him. He tucked it under the seat of her car the next day, his hands steady. He knew she would never suspect it. She trusted that he would never question her. That was her first mistake. At home, he watched Caleb build towers out of blocks, his laughter filling the room. Daddy, can you help me? Caleb asked, his eyes wide with innocence. Of course, buddy, Ethan said, forcing a smile as he sat down with his son. But even as he helped Caleb stack the blocks, his mind was elsewhere, already planning. That night, he retrieved the recorder and listened in the dark. The voices were low at first, muffled, but then he heard it, Devin's voice, smooth and sure. You are beautiful, Devin said. Cassie laughed softly, a sound that cut deep. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him like poison. This was no mistake, no misunderstanding. This was betrayal in its purest form. The next morning, Cassie hummed as she made breakfast, her eyes bright and carefree. She had no idea that he knew. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Because he was no longer just watching. He was waiting. He was ready. And when the time came, he would not hold back. The next Saturday, the sun was bright, the sky a flawless blue. Ethan took Caleb to his soccer game at the local field, the one Cassie had insisted on signing him up for. Families were scattered across the grass, folding chairs and blankets spread out as children's laughter filled the air. Ethan sat on the bleachers, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw Cassie a few rows down, her face glowing as she waved to someone. And then he saw him, Devin, wearing a crisp white shirt and aviator sunglasses. Devin was the picture of casual confidence, a stranger in a familiar scene. Cassie caught Devin's eye and her smile was too bright, too personal. She waved him over, her voice soft but clear. Devin, this is Ethan, Caleb's dad. Her tone was light, like this was all perfectly normal. Devin extended a hand, his smile polite. Good to finally meet you, Ethan. Cassie has told me so much about you. His handshake was firm, but there was something in his eyes, an arrogance, a challenge. Ethan met his gaze squarely. Likewise, he said, his voice calm and even. Inside, his mind was already turning. He noted everything. The way Devin's hand lingered on Cassie's back, the small, knowing glances they shared when they thought no one was watching. Caleb ran up, breathless and beaming. Daddy, did you see me score? He shouted, his eyes bright with excitement. I did, buddy. You were amazing, Ethan said, his smile genuine for his son. But his eyes never left Devin, even as he knelt to high-five Caleb. After the game, Devin offered to buy drinks for everyone at the small cafe across the street. Cassie's eyes flickered to Ethan, and he nodded once, though every instinct in him was on edge. Sure, he said. Why not? At the cafe, the conversation was polite on the surface, talk of work, hobbies, the weather. But underneath, it was a dance of silent tensions. Devin talked with easy charm, but Ethan watched every word, every flicker of his eyes. He could feel the betrayal between them like a live wire. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan forced a smile. Thanks for the drinks, Devin, he said, his tone warm but hollow. Devin grinned. Anytime, man. Ethan nodded, but his mind was already racing. This was not just a chance meeting. This was a declaration, and he was ready for war. The following evening was heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Ethan sat on the porch, the air thick with the scent of barbecue smoke and late summer flowers. Cassie sat beside him, her eyes on the fading light, her expression distant. Caleb had gone to bed early, exhausted from the game, leaving them in a quiet that felt too loud. Ethan studied Cassie's profile, the curve of her cheek, the small frown tugging at her mouth. He wondered if she felt the tension that crackled in the space between them. Nice evening, Cassie said, her voice soft, almost wistful. Yeah, Ethan said, his tone measured. It is. Silence stretched between them, and then Cassie spoke again. Ethan, is everything okay? She asked, her eyes searching his face. Ethan let the question hang in the air, letting it sink in. Everything is fine, he said finally, his voice calm but distant. Just thinking about a lot of things. She nodded, her fingers playing with the edge of her glass. I feel like we are not really talking lately, she said, her voice cracking just a little. Ethan studied her carefully. Maybe we are not, he said. Maybe we have both been busy. She winced at that, and he saw it. The flicker of guilt, the flash of fear. But she said nothing, just turned her gaze back to the horizon, her lips pressed tight. After a long moment, she stood, her movements slow and deliberate. I am going to bed, she said, her voice quiet. Ethan watched her go, the soft click of the screen door behind her a punctuation mark on their fractured silence. He sat there for a long time, the night wrapping around him like a shroud. In that stillness, he made a silent promise to himself. He would not confront her with half-truths or angry words. When the time came, he would have everything, every piece of the puzzle, every lie exposed. And when he did, he would not leave any doubt. The next day, Ethan's resolve hardened. He spent the morning in his study, poring over the notes and bank statements Mark had found. Every transfer, every meeting Cassie thought she had hidden, it was all there in cold black and white. By noon, he had memorized every detail. He shut the folder and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it in his chest. This was not just a betrayal of love. It was a betrayal of trust, of family. And he would not let it go unpunished. That afternoon, he picked Caleb up from school. They stopped for ice cream on the way home, and for a moment, Ethan let himself just be a father. Caleb's laughter was a balm, a reminder of what really mattered. Daddy, can we go to the beach this weekend? Caleb asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Of course, buddy, Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. We will go wherever you want. When they got home, Cassie was in the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up as they came in, her smile quick and bright. Hey, you too, she said. Hey, Ethan replied, setting down the grocery bags. Smells good. Cassie beamed, but there was a tightness in her eyes, a strain she could not quite hide. Just trying something new, she said lightly. Ethan watched her move around the kitchen, the way her hands fumbled just slightly as she reached for a pan. He could see it, the weight of her secrets pressing down, fraying the edges of her calm. After dinner, when the house was quiet, Ethan slipped out to the garage and retrieved the recorder again. He sat in the dark, the device cold and small in his hand. He pressed play. Cassie's voice, soft and intimate. I cannot stop thinking about you, she said, her words like knives. Devin's reply, smooth and confident. You know I will always take care of you, he said. Ethan sat there, the voices filling the room, each word a confirmation of what he already knew. This was not a mistake. This was a choice she had made, again and again. He turned off the recorder and sat in the silence, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He knew what he had to do, and when the time came, he would not hesitate. The night was quiet, but Ethan's mind was not. He sat in the small office he had turned into his war room, the dim lamp casting long shadows on the walls. He had the recorder in front of him. The files Mark had sent him neatly stacked to one side. This was no longer just suspicion. It was a case he was building, piece by piece. He pressed play again, listening to Cassie's voice echo through the room. I cannot wait to see you, she whispered, her words breathy and soft. Devon's laughter followed, smooth and low. Tomorrow, my love, he said. Ethan's jaw tightened. Each word was a betrayal, a stain on the life he had built with her. But he forced himself to listen, to absorb it all. He knew that when the time came to confront her, he would need to have every detail burned into his memory. He turned off the recorder and leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He stared at the ceiling, the silence pressing in on him like a weight. He had spent years fighting battles overseas, but this was the hardest fight of all, because this was his family, his home. When he finally rose from the chair, he moved quietly through the house. Cassie was asleep in their bed, her breathing even and peaceful. Ethan watched her for a long moment, his face unreadable. He wondered if she dreamed of Devon, if she thought of him while she lay in the bed they had shared for so many years. He left the room without a word, his resolve hardening with every step. He would not let her lies destroy him. He would not let her take away the life he had built for Caleb. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about saving himself. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window as Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee. He stood at the sink, staring out at the yard where Caleb's soccer ball lay forgotten in the grass. The world outside was calm, but inside, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge. Cassie came down the stairs, her hair still damp from her shower, her robe tied loosely around her waist. She looked at Ethan with a soft smile. You are up early, she said, her voice warm and casual. I could not sleep, he replied, his voice even. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. Cassie moved around the kitchen, making small talk about Caleb's upcoming game, about the weather. But Ethan watched her carefully, noting every nervous glance, every pause in her sentences. She was trying too hard to be normal, to be the perfect wife. Caleb came running down the stairs, his laughter a bright spark in the heavy air. Daddy, can we go to the park later? He asked, his eyes wide with hope. Ethan forced a smile. Of course, buddy. We can go wherever you want, he said, ruffling Caleb's hair. But even as he spoke, his mind was elsewhere, already planning, already watching. Cassie watched them with a small, tight smile. I have an appointment later, she said lightly. Just a quick meeting with a friend. Ethan nodded, his face calm. Sure, he said. You do what you need to do. As Cassie turned away, Ethan saw the way her shoulders sagged with relief. She thought he was still in the dark, still the trusting husband. But she was wrong. He had seen the truth in her eyes, in every word she tried to hide behind a smile. When she left, Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her car disappear down the street. The bond they once shared was gone, shattered by her lies. But he would not let her see the cracks in his armor. Not yet. The sun was high when Ethan took Caleb to the park. They walked along the winding trails, Caleb's hand small and warm in his. Ethan forced himself to smile, to be present, even as his mind was a storm of thoughts. Daddy, why does Mommy go away so much? Caleb asked suddenly, his voice small. Ethan's heart clenched, but he kept his voice calm. Mommy has things she needs to do, he said, choosing his words carefully. But you and me? We will always be here for each other. Always. Caleb nodded, his small hand tightening around Ethan's. They watched the ducks swimming in the pond, the sun glinting off the water. For a moment, it felt almost normal, almost like the life they had before the lies. But when they got home, Ethan's calm cracked just a little. He saw Cassie's car in the driveway, saw her slip out and glance around nervously. She did not see him watching from the corner of the window, his eyes cold and steady. Inside, she acted like nothing had happened. "Hey, you too," she said brightly, moving to hug Caleb. "Did you have fun?" "Yeah, Mommy," Caleb said, his smile bright. But Ethan saw the way his son's eyes searched hers, the small uncertainty there. Even Caleb could sense the shift, the fracture in their family. Ethan put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Why do you not go play in your room for a bit, buddy?" he said softly. Caleb nodded and ran upstairs, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Cassie moved closer, her smile strained. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice light. Ethan's gaze was steady. "Everything is fine," he said. But inside, he was steel. He would protect Caleb, no matter what. He would shield him from the fallout, from the lies and the heartbreak. And when the time came to confront it all, he would make sure there was no doubt, no escape from the truth. Because he was not just a husband. He was a father. And he would not let her betrayal destroy the one thing that mattered most. The next few days passed like a slow-burning fuse. Ethan watched Cassie move around the house with her practiced smiles and careful words. She was playing her role perfectly, too perfectly. Each time she touched his arm or kissed his cheek, it felt like a test of how far he would let her lies go. At night, he lay awake, the silence heavy in the dark. He thought of the recordings, the text messages, the phone calls. Every piece of the puzzle was coming together. He could feel the storm building inside him, a fury he kept locked behind calm eyes. One evening, as Cassie chatted with a neighbor on the porch, Ethan stepped into his study. He spread the files across the desk, the bank statements, the photos Mark had taken of her meetings with Devin. The evidence was all there, laid out like a battle plan. He traced the lines of the bank transfers with his finger, the numbers cold and absolute. She thought she could hide this from him, that he would never see the truth. She had no idea who he really was. When Cassie came inside, she paused at the door, her smile faltering as she saw the papers on the desk. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice too calm. "Just work stuff," Ethan said, closing the folder casually. His tone was light, but his eyes met hers with an intensity she could not match. Cassie hesitated, then nodded. "All right," she said, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Ethan watched her walk away, his jaw tight. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, there would be no shelter for her lies. The next morning, Ethan sat in his car outside the bank, the morning sun glinting off the windows. He had an appointment with a friend who owed him a favor, a banker who had worked with him when he was stationed overseas, someone who knew how to keep quiet. He walked in, his posture calm, his face unreadable. The banker met him in a small office, the door closing softly behind them. "Ethan," he said, shaking his hand. "I got your message. What do you need?" "I need everything on this account," Ethan said, sliding the paper across the desk. The account was in Cassie's name, hidden away from their shared finances, a secret she had never intended for him to find. The banker looked at the numbers, then back at Ethan. This is not small money," he said quietly. "I know," Ethan said, "and I need to know where it is going." The banker nodded and typed quickly, the keys clicking softly. Ethan watched the screen, each line of data another betrayal. Transfers to Devin's name. Payments to a company Ethan had never heard of, shell corporations, and empty promises. When the banker handed him the printout, Ethan took it with steady hands. "Thank you," he said. His voice was calm, but inside he felt a cold satisfaction. The pieces were all falling into place. He left the bank and sat in his car, the paper in his hand like a weapon. Cassie's secrets were no longer safe, and he would make sure she saw just how much he knew. At home, Cassie was in the kitchen, her back to him as she stirred a pot on the stove. She turned, smiling, but Ethan's eyes were like ice. "Everything all right?" she asked. Perfect, he said, his tone even. She would never see it coming, because she thought he was still the man she had once known. But he was not. Not anymore. That evening, the air was heavy with heat and the scent of jasmine from the garden. Ethan sat on the porch, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He watched the sun sink behind the trees, the sky turning gold and crimson. Cassie joined him, a soft smile on her lips. "It is a beautiful night," she said, her voice gentle. "It is," Ethan agreed, his tone steady. He took a sip of his drink, the burn of it grounding him. He had all the evidence he needed, every lie laid bare. But he was not ready to end it yet. He needed to be sure, completely sure. Cassie leaned against the railing, her eyes on the darkening sky. "You have been so quiet lately," she said. "Is everything okay?" Ethan looked at her, his gaze calm. "I am just thinking," he said. "About us. About everything." She reached for his hand, her touch soft and careful. "I know I have been busy," she said. "But I love you, Ethan. You know that, right?" He let her hold his hand, but he did not squeeze back. "I know," he said quietly, but he also knew it was a lie. Cassie's smile wavered for a moment, but she recovered quickly. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us," she said. "Get away from everything." Ethan nodded slowly, though he knew the only trip they would be taking was to the edge of the truth she had buried so deep. "Maybe," he said, his voice soft. As she went inside to check on Caleb, Ethan sat back in his chair, the weight of everything pressing down on him. He would not confront her tonight, but soon. He would let her have this last moment of pretending. Because when he finally exposed her lies, he wanted her to feel it, every single betrayal, every secret she thought she had hidden. And when that moment came, there would be no going back. The next morning, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Meet me at the docks," it read. No questions, no explanations, just the coordinates, a lifeline in the storm. Ethan parked near the quiet water, the sun low and cold on the horizon. Mark was already there, leaning against a rusted railing, his face half in shadow. The salty air smelled of oil and tide, a familiar comfort from a life they had both known. "Mark," Ethan said, his voice steady as he approached. Mark looked up, his eyes sharp. "You got what you needed?" he asked. "I did," Ethan replied, holding up the folder of documents, the transfers, the recordings, the proof of Cassie's betrayal. "It is all here." Mark took the folder and flipped through it, his brow furrowing. "She really did this," he said, his voice low. Ethan nodded, the words like steel in his chest. "She did. And Devin is deeper in it than I thought." Mark let out a slow breath, his jaw tight. "You know what you have to do, brother," he said. "This is not just about her. This is about you and Caleb." Ethan looked out at the water, the waves slapping against the pier. "I know," he said, "but I have to be sure. I have to know every piece before I tear it all down." Mark clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Then let me help you," he said. "I will dig into Devin, his business, his past. If there is something to find, I will find it." Ethan met his eyes, gratitude flickering in the cold calm of his face. "Thank you," he said simply. Mark nodded. "We will do this right," he said. "She will not see it coming." As they stood there in the gray morning light, Ethan felt a rare peace settle in his chest. He was not alone. He had an ally, someone who understood the quiet wars men like them had to fight. He turned back to his car, his resolve stronger than ever. Because this was not just about betrayal. This was about justice, and he was ready to see it through. That evening, Ethan came home to find Caleb sitting on the living room floor, his small hands clutching his favorite action figure. Cassie was in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke in a low voice. Too low, too careful. Ethan crouched beside Caleb, his voice gentle. "Hey, buddy. What is wrong?" he asked. Caleb's eyes were wide and wet. "Mommy. She said she was going to be with her friend tonight," he said, his voice small. "But I heard her say she was going to see Devin." Ethan's chest tightened. He took a slow breath, keeping his voice calm for his son. "It is okay, Caleb," he said softly. You are safe here. I promise. Caleb sniffled, his small shoulders shaking. Why does Mommy not want to be with us? He asked, his voice breaking. Ethan pulled him close, his heart aching. Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes, buddy, he said quietly. But that does not mean I will ever stop loving you. You are my whole world. Caleb clung to him, his small body trembling. Ethan closed his eyes, his hand resting protectively on his son's back. He would not let this destroy Caleb. He would not let Cassie's choices take away the one thing that mattered most. When Cassie came into the room, her phone call finished, she paused at the sight of them. What is going on? She asked, her voice a little too sharp. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm but his eyes hard. Caleb was just feeling a little sad, he said evenly. He needs us to be here for him. Cassie opened her mouth, then closed it again. She nodded, but her eyes flickered with something. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Of course, she said quietly. Ethan held Caleb close, his resolve like iron. No matter what happened next, he would protect his son. He would be the anchor in the storm. Because no matter what lies Cassie told, Caleb would always know who he could trust. A few days later, Cassie suggested a dinner out, just the two of them. Ethan said yes, though every instinct in him was on edge. They went to a small restaurant on the edge of town, the kind of place they had loved years ago, before everything changed. The candlelight flickered between them, casting soft shadows on Cassie's face. She wore a red dress, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but to Ethan, every curve of her smile was a lie. So, Cassie said, her tone light. How is work? You have been distant lately. Ethan took a sip of his drink, his gaze steady. Work is fine, he said. Just a lot on my mind. Cassie reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I know things have been hard, she said softly. But I love you, Ethan. I want us to be okay. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm, his mind already mapping out every word she spoke. I want that too, he said quietly. But it is not just about us, is it? She flinched, her hand pulling back. What do you mean? She asked, her voice too quick. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. I think you know exactly what I mean, he said. For a moment, she looked like she might protest, but then she smiled. A small, brittle smile. I just want us to be happy again, she said. Ethan nodded slowly. I know, he said. But in his mind, he was already preparing for the confrontation to come. Because dinner was just a performance, a mask she wore to keep him in the dark. He paid the bill, his face calm as they walked back to the car. Cassie slipped her hand into his, her touch soft and careful. But he felt nothing, because he knew what she was hiding. And soon, she would have to face it all. The drive home from dinner was filled with a brittle, uneasy silence. Cassie gazed out the window, her face bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, every muscle in his body coiled tight. The hum of the tires on the road was the only sound between them. When they pulled into the driveway, Cassie reached over to touch his arm. Ethan, thank you for tonight, she said softly. I know things have been hard. He forced a small smile, his voice low and even. You are welcome, he said. But inside, his mind was already racing. Her carefully chosen words, the rehearsed softness in her tone. She was trying to keep him calm, to keep him close enough to control. As they stepped inside, the house was quiet. Caleb was asleep, his small form curled under the covers in the room next to theirs. Ethan paused in the doorway, watching his son's peaceful face. It gave him the strength he needed. In the kitchen, Cassie poured them each a glass of wine, her movements slow and graceful. She handed him a glass, her eyes searching his. I want us to find our way back to each other, she said. Can we do that, Ethan? He took the glass, his fingers brushing hers. We will see, he said quietly. She flinched just slightly at that, her smile faltering. But she recovered quickly, turning away to sip her wine. Ethan watched her, his mind cold and clear. This was her last chance to come clean, to be honest. But he knew she would not take it. Because she thought she could control the story, could spin it any way she wanted. But the storm was coming, and he was ready to let it break. The next day, Ethan met with Mark in a quiet diner on the edge of town. The clink of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation around them were a strange comfort, a thin veil over the raw truth they were discussing. Mark slid a small envelope across the table. "Devin has been busy," he said quietly. "I dug into his background. There is more to him than just an affair." Ethan opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the photographs and documents. Devin shaking hands with a man Ethan recognized from the papers, an accountant known for laundering money. A record of phone calls late at night, the same number again and again. "He is using Cassie," Mark said, his voice hard. "He has her wrapped around his finger. And he is bleeding you both dry." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I knew he was a threat," he said, his voice low. "But this is bigger than I thought." Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. "You need to be careful, Ethan," he said. "Men like Devin do not just walk away. If he thinks you are coming for him, he will try to bury you." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the photos. "He can try," he said quietly, "but he will not win." They left the diner together, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them both. Ethan drove home with a single thought burning in his mind. He would not let Devin take any more from him. He would not let Cassie's lies and Devin's schemes destroy everything he had built. When he got home, Cassie was in the living room, reading a book. She looked up and smiled, but he saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. She knew something was shifting. She could feel it. He sat across from her, his voice calm and measured. "I have been thinking," he said, "about everything." Cassie swallowed hard, her smile trembling. "And?" she asked softly. Ethan held her gaze, his mind made up. "We will talk. Soon," he said, "but not tonight." And as he walked away, he knew her web of lies was starting to come undone, and he was the one pulling the threads. Ethan spent the next day in the quiet of his study, piecing together every fragment of the story he had collected. He had the evidence, the money trails, the late-night whispers, the cold truths hidden in Cassie's laughter. But there was one more piece to the puzzle: Lauren. Lauren was Devin's wife, a woman with her own stake in this twisted game. Ethan had reached out to her in a moment of shared betrayal, a quiet message sent late at night. And now, she was ready to talk. They met in a small park, the air cool and filled with the scent of freshly cut grass. Lauren stood by the fountain, her arms crossed, her expression hard. "Ethan," she said as he approached, "you wanted to see me?" "I did," he said, his voice calm. "Because you deserve to know what your husband has been doing. And because you deserve to see what he has taken from both of us." He handed her the folder, the weight of the papers solid between them. She flipped through the photos, her lips tightening, her eyes hardening with every turn of the page. "I knew he was cheating," she said finally, her voice low and trembling. "But I did not know it was this deep." "It is," Ethan said quietly, "and I am not going to let him get away with it. I will not let him take any more from my son." Lauren closed the folder slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Then we will take him down together," she said, her voice steady. "I will make sure he never hurts anyone like this again." As they stood there, a fragile alliance forged in betrayal and fury, Ethan felt a new sense of purpose settle in his chest. This was no longer just his fight, it was theirs. And together, they would make sure Devin and Cassie paid for every lie, every stolen moment. Because when the truth finally came out, there would be nowhere left for them to hide. The wind carried a faint chill that evening as Ethan stood on the porch, staring into the deepening dusk. The weight of the alliance he had forged with Lauren settled over him like armor. She had given him new details, new cracks in the story he had once called his life. Inside, the house was quiet. Cassie was in the kitchen, her back to him, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The soft click of knives, and the low murmur of music on the radio could almost make it seem like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Ethan walked in, his boots heavy on the worn wooden floors. "Dinner smells good," he said, his voice calm, measured. Cassie turned, her smile bright but brittle. "I thought we could have a nice night," she said softly. "Just us." Ethan studied her face, the practiced ease of her movements, the small ways she tried to keep control. "Just us," he echoed, his tone even. "Like old times." She nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. "Yes, like old times," she said, turning back to the stove. He watched her carefully, every small gesture like a puzzle piece slotting into place. He saw the new necklace around her neck, delicate and expensive, something he had never seen before. "Nice necklace," he said, his voice mild. Cassie's hand froze for just a moment before she continued stirring. "Oh, just something I found on sale," she said quickly. Ethan said nothing, but he noted the small catch in her voice, the way her fingers trembled. She was not as careful as she thought. They ate dinner in near silence, the sound of forks against plates like a clock ticking down. Afterward, Cassie reached for his hand across the table. "Ethan, I know things have been hard," she said, her voice soft and coaxing. "But I want us to be okay. I really do." Ethan met her eyes, his expression unreadable. "Do you?" he asked quietly. Cassie swallowed, her smile faltering. "Of course I do," she said, but the words tasted false, hollow in the space between them. He rose from the table, his chair scraping softly against the floor. "We will see," he said. His voice was calm, but inside, the storm was raging. Because he knew the truth now. Cassie had not just betrayed him. She had betrayed herself. Ethan spent the next morning piecing together every fragment of the story, every lie she had fed him over the years. In his study, the evidence lay spread out across the desk, each piece a testament to the betrayal she thought she had hidden so well. The photos Mark had taken showed Cassie and Devon together in stolen moments, a quiet lunch at a corner cafe, a hand brushing an arm in the shadows of a parking lot. Ethan studied them all, his fingers tracing the cold truth of each image. But it was the money transfers that cut deepest. Hidden accounts, secret payments, all woven together in a web of lies that stretched back for months, maybe even years. Cassie's betrayal was not just an affair, it was a conspiracy. He closed his eyes, letting the weight of it all settle over him. The pain was sharp, but it was also a clarifying fire. He saw everything now, every small betrayal, every moment she had chosen someone else over their family. When the door opened and Cassie peeked in, her smile was too bright, too easy. "Hey," she said softly. "You have been in here all morning." "Just thinking," he said, his voice calm. He turned to face her, his eyes steady and cool. Cassie hesitated, then stepped inside. "About what?" she asked, her tone light, but her hands twisting nervously. Ethan let his gaze drift over the papers, then back to her face. "About us," he said quietly. "About what we have become." Her smile faltered, and for a moment, he thought he saw something real flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or shame. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by her practiced calm. "I just want us to be okay," she said again, her voice almost pleading. Ethan nodded slowly, but he did not believe her. Not anymore. The pieces of the puzzle were all there, and he was no longer blind. He would let her have this moment of calm, because soon, the storm he had been holding back would break. That night, the house was quiet, the darkness pressing in close. Ethan sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Cassie moved around him, her movements careful, almost cautious. She could feel it too, that something was shifting beneath the surface. She sat down across from him, her eyes searching his face. "Ethan," she said softly, "is there something you are not telling me?" He looked at her, his expression calm but distant. "I think we have both been keeping secrets," he said quietly. Cassie's breath caught. her fingers curling around the edge of her seat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice too quick. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I think you know exactly what I mean," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the steel in it. For a moment, her mask cracked. He saw the flicker of panic in her eyes, the way her mouth opened, then closed again. "Ethan, but he held up a hand, stopping her. "Not tonight," he said calmly. "Tonight, I just want to sit here and remember who we were before all of this." Cassie swallowed hard, her lips trembling. She reached for his hand, but he pulled back, his movements slow and deliberate. She flinched, and he saw it. The small, naked fear in her eyes. He rose from the chair, his voice quiet but firm. "I am going to bed," he said. "Good night, Cassie." She watched him go, her face pale in the lamplight. For a moment, she looked like a stranger in her own home. Ethan walked down the hallway, his steps steady. He felt the weight of the truth in every breath, every heartbeat. The mask she had worn for so long was slipping, and soon there would be nothing left to hide behind. Because he had seen the truth, and there was no going back. The morning after their tense exchange, Ethan woke early. The sun had barely risen, casting long, pale fingers of light through the blinds. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching Cassie's sleeping form, her face turned away from him. She looked peaceful, but he knew it was a lie. That peace was just another mask. He rose quietly, moving through the house like a shadow. In the kitchen, he poured himself a cup of coffee, the bitter scent grounding him in the quiet of the early hours. The house was still, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator and the slow, even rhythm of his own breathing. As he sipped his coffee, he thought of the evidence he had gathered, the photos, the bank statements, the whispered conversations captured on tape. Each one was a nail in the coffin of the life he had once believed in. Each one was a step closer to the truth. Cassie came down the stairs, her robe wrapped tight around her. "Morning," she said, her voice too bright, too normal. "Morning," Ethan said, his tone calm and unreadable. She moved closer, hesitating as she reached for a cup. "I was thinking, maybe we could spend the day together," she said. "Just us. Like old times." Ethan watched her carefully, his eyes steady. "Sure," he said softly. "Like old times." But even as he spoke, he felt the distance between them, a chasm of secrets and lies she would never bridge. Cassie smiled, relief flickering across her face. But it was the relief of someone who thought they were safe, not someone who was truly innocent. They spent the morning together, the air between them charged with unspoken truths. Ethan was calm, his every word and gesture deliberate. He watched her closely, noting the way she flinched when he looked at her too long, the way her smile slipped when she thought he might say too much. By the end of the day, the illusion she had built was starting to crack, and Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before it shattered completely. The next day dawned cold and gray, the clouds hanging low over the small town like a warning. Ethan met Mark at a quiet diner again, the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. Mark's expression was serious, his eyes dark with the weight of what he was about to say. "I found something," Mark said, sliding a small flash drive across the table. "Devin has been playing more than one game." Ethan took the drive, his fingers closing around it like a lifeline. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Devin has been blackmailing Cassie," Mark said, his voice low. "He has something on her, something from before you even met. She tried to break it off, but he threatened to expose her if she did." Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "What does he have?" he asked, his voice a quiet growl. Mark shook his head. "I do not know exactly, but it is enough that she stayed with him, enough that she kept lying to you." Ethan sat back in his chair, the pieces of the puzzle shifting in his mind. It was not just about the affair. It was about survival, about secrets Cassie had buried so deep she would do anything to keep them hidden. Mark leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Ethan, this changes everything," he said. "You need to be careful. Devin is dangerous. and if he feels cornered, he will lash out. Ethan nodded slowly, his face set. I am not afraid of him, he said. I just need to know everything, every single piece. As he drove home, his mind raced. Cassie's betrayal was more than he had imagined. It was not just her lies. It was the way she had twisted herself into Devon's schemes, the way she had let her secrets swallow their life whole. When he stepped through the door, Cassie was in the living room, her eyes bright with forced cheer. Hi, honey, she said. How was your day? Ethan looked at her, his voice calm and steady. We need to talk, he said. And for the first time, he saw the mask she wore crack completely. Ethan led her to the small study, the room that had become his war room. He closed the door behind them, the soft click of the latch sounding final in the quiet. Cassie stood in the middle of the room, her hands twisting in front of her, her eyes darting from the papers on the desk to the cold calm in Ethan's face. What is going on, Ethan? She asked, her voice shaking. He took a step closer, his gaze steady. I know about Devon, he said quietly. I know about the money. And I know about the lies. Cassie flinched, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find the right words. I can explain. He held up a hand, stopping her. Do not lie to me again, Cassie, he said, his voice low and even. I need to hear the truth. All of it. She looked at him, her eyes wide and scared. Ethan, he has something on me, she said finally, her voice breaking. Something from before we met. If I did not stay with him, if I did not keep quiet, he said he would ruin everything. Ethan felt his chest tighten. What does he have? He asked quietly. Cassie swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. It was a mistake I made, something I thought I had left behind, she said. He found out, and he used it to control me. I never wanted this, Ethan. I swear. He stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of anger and cold resolve. Why did you not tell me? He asked. Because I was afraid, she said, her voice small. Afraid of losing everything. Afraid of losing you and Caleb. Ethan let out a slow breath, his hands closing into fists at his sides. You already have, he said quietly. Cassie sobbed, her shoulders shaking. But Ethan did not move to comfort her. Because the truth was out now, and there was no going back. And in the quiet that followed, he felt the final pieces of his plan falling into place. Ethan sat alone in the quiet of his study, the weight of Cassie's confession echoing in his mind. The low hum of the air conditioning was the only sound as he stared at the stack of evidence on the desk, the cold, hard truth of everything she had hidden. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the stubble on his jaw, the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. But he would not let it slow him down. He had been trained for harder missions than this, missions that demanded patience, precision, and a heart as cold as steel. He picked up the flash drive Mark had given him and plugged it into his laptop. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, files, recordings, proof of Devon's threats, the leverage he held over Cassie like a noose. Ethan listened to the recordings, Devon's smooth voice, dripping with false charm. You know what I have, Cassie. Do not even think about running. One word from me, and it all comes crashing down. He felt a cold fury burn in his chest. Devon had manipulated her, twisted her fear into a weapon. But Ethan was done being a bystander. He would not let Devon's games destroy everything. He picked up his phone and called Mark. I have what I need, he said quietly. I am ready. Mark's voice was calm but resolute. You sure, brother? Once we start this, there is no turning back. I am sure, Ethan said. This is not just about me anymore. It is about Caleb, and I will not let this end without justice. As he ended the call, he felt a calm settle over him, a clarity that cut through the pain and the betrayal. The mission was clear now. Protect his son, reclaim his life, and make them both pay. He stood, feeling the weight of his decision settle on his shoulders like an old friend. This was not just a betrayal. It was a battle, and he was ready to fight. The next morning dawned bright and cold, the air sharp and clear as Ethan walked Caleb to the bus stop. He knelt down beside his son, adjusting the straps of his backpack, his fingers gentle but firm. "Listen to me, buddy," Ethan said quietly. "No matter what happens, you remember this. You are safe. I will always be here for you." Caleb's eyes were wide and innocent, his small hands gripping the straps. "Are you okay, Daddy?" he asked softly. Ethan forced a small smile. "I am okay," he said. "We are going to be okay." As the bus pulled up, he watched Caleb climb aboard, his heart heavy but resolute. He would not let this darkness touch his son. He would keep him safe, no matter what it took. When he got home, Cassie was waiting in the kitchen, her face pale and drawn. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan's jaw tightened. "About what?" he asked, his tone calm but cold. She swallowed hard. "Devin called me this morning," she said. "He knows you are looking into him. He said he would hurt Caleb if we do not stop." For a moment, everything in Ethan went still. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room, leaving only the cold, hard edges of fear. But then he took a breath, steady and controlled. "He will not touch Caleb," he said quietly. Cassie's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, please, he is dangerous. He will not stop." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low and unwavering. "I will not stop either," he said. "He will not get near Caleb. I promise you that." Cassie shook her head, her hands trembling. "I did not want any of this," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, "but it does not change what has to be done." As he walked out of the room, his mind was already turning. Plans, contingencies, the careful strategies of a man who had faced worse than this and survived. He would not let Devin win. He would not let his son pay the price for Cassie's mistakes. That evening, the house was quiet, the air heavy with unspoken words. Cassie sat on the edge of the couch, her hands twisting in her lap, her eyes red and swollen. Ethan stood across the room, his posture calm but unyielding. "Ethan, please," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I know I have lied to you. I know I have hurt you. But I was trying to protect Caleb." Ethan's eyes were hard, his voice low and controlled. "Protect him," he said. "By lying to him. By lying to me." Cassie flinched, her shoulders curling in on themselves. "I did not know what else to do," she said, her voice trembling. "Devin had everything. He had the power to destroy me, to destroy us. You let him," Ethan said quietly. "You let him take everything." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I thought if I just did what he wanted, it would end," she said. "But it never ended. It just got worse." Ethan took a slow breath, his jaw tight. "And now it is my turn to end it," he said. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the finality in it. Cassie sobbed, her hands covering her face. "I never wanted this, Ethan. I never wanted to lose you or Caleb." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes cold but clear. "You already did," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a desperate kind of hope. "Can we fix this?" she whispered. "Please, can we fix this?" He paused, the weight of everything pressing down on him. "I do not know," he said finally. "But I know one thing. I will protect Caleb. No matter what." Cassie nodded, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ethan turned and walked away, his steps slow but certain. Because he was done waiting. The time for second chances was over, and the time for action had come. Ethan could not shake the weight of Cassie's desperate words as he sat alone in the quiet of the night. The darkness pressed in close, broken only by the faint glow of the moon through the window. He turned the flash drive over in his hands, feeling the cold plastic bite into his palm. He knew that everything Cassie had said was meant to protect herself, but it was too late for excuses. He had spent years living by one simple code: trust is earned, and she had spent months shattering it. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, the amber liquid catching the moonlight. Each sip was a slow burn, a quiet promise to himself that he would not let her lies cloud his judgment. Cassie came into the room, her footsteps hesitant. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. Please, you have to understand. I was terrified. He looked at her, his eyes steady and calm. I understand fear, he said quietly. I have lived in it. I have fought it. But I do not let it define me. And I will not let it define our son's life, either. Cassie's breath caught, her eyes filling with tears. I never meant for it to get this far, she whispered. I thought I could control it. But Devin, Ethan cut her off with a small shake of his head. Devin is a predator, he said, his voice like cold steel. But you let him in. You let him take what was ours. She sobbed, her shoulders shaking as she covered her face. Ethan watched her, his jaw tight, his mind clear. This ends now, he said quietly. No more lies. No more secrets. Cassie lowered her hands, her eyes red and swollen. What are you going to do? She asked in a small voice. Ethan's expression was calm, resolute. I am going to end this, he said. And when I do, you will have to decide what side you are really on. He walked past her, each step measured and deliberate. There was no more room for doubt. The line had been drawn, and he would not waver. The next day, Ethan met Lauren in a quiet corner of a city cafe. The clink of coffee cups and low murmurs of conversation surrounded them like a shield, but their eyes were locked on each other. Lauren's gaze was sharp, her jaw set. I spoke to my lawyer, she said. We can freeze Devin's assets, but we have to move fast. Once he knows we are coming for him, he will try to vanish. Ethan nodded, his expression calm. I have the recordings, he said. I have the proof. And I am ready. Lauren's lips twitched into a tight smile. Good, she said. Because once we start, there is no going back. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold and clear. I never planned on going back, he said. They spent an hour strategizing, laying out every detail like a military operation. Lauren's calm precision was a perfect match for Ethan's quiet resolve. It was a plan built on betrayal, but also on a shared need for justice. As they stood to leave, Lauren paused, her eyes softening just slightly. Thank you, Ethan, she said, for fighting for your son, and for showing me I do not have to be a victim. He met her gaze, his voice low but certain. We are both done being victims, he said. Now it is time to take back what they stole from us. As he walked back to his car, the weight of what lay ahead settled in his chest like a steady drumbeat. This was no longer just about exposing an affair. It was about tearing down a man who thought he could destroy lives and walk away clean. Ethan gripped the wheel as he drove home, his mind focused, every detail etched into his memory. There was no fear left in him, only the calm, measured certainty of a man who knew exactly what he had to do. And when he finally faced Devin, there would be no mercy. The next evening, Ethan sat in his study, the low lamp casting long shadows across the walls. He could hear Caleb's laughter drifting from upstairs, a bright, innocent sound that grounded him, gave him purpose. He picked up his phone and called Mark. We are ready, he said quietly. Tomorrow night. Everything ends tomorrow. Mark's voice was steady. I will be there, he said. Just say the word. Ethan ended the call and leaned back in his chair. He let his eyes drift over the papers spread before him. Every line of evidence, every cold, hard truth. He had spent weeks gathering it, piece by piece. Now, it was time to let it speak for itself. He could feel the calm of a soldier before a mission, the same quiet clarity he had felt on nights before combat. Every breath was deliberate, every heartbeat steady. Cassie came to the door, her hands twisting nervously. Ethan, what are you planning? She asked softly. He looked up at her, his expression unreadable. I am planning to end this, he said. To protect our son. To make sure Devin pays for everything. She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. Please, do not let this destroy you too, she whispered. Ethan stood, his movements slow and sure. I am not the one who let this in, Cassie, he said. But I will be the one to end it. As she turned away, he watched her go, his mind clear. The trap was set, the pieces in place. Tomorrow, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending. He went upstairs and paused at Caleb's door, watching his son sleep. "I promise you, buddy," he whispered. "I will make this right." And as he turned away, he felt it, the quiet, unbreakable resolve of a man who would not let his family fall. The next evening was warm and heavy with the scent of late summer air. Ethan waited outside the restaurant where he had arranged to meet Cassie and Devin. The neon glow of the sign flickered in the dusk, casting harsh light over the quiet street. When Cassie and Devin arrived, their faces were a perfect mask of calm. Devin smiled, his arm draped casually around Cassie's shoulders, like he owned the world. "Ethan," Devin said smoothly as they approached. "Good to see you. Let us make this quick. I have other plans tonight." Ethan's eyes were calm as he nodded. "Of course," he said. "Let us get this over with." Inside, the restaurant was dimly lit, the hush of conversation around them a quiet backdrop. They sat at a small table near the back, and Ethan watched the way Cassie's hand trembled as she picked up her glass. "So," Devin said, leaning back in his chair with a confident smirk. "What do you want, Ethan? A confession? An apology?" Ethan's voice was quiet but clear. "I want the truth," he said. "And I want you to know, this ends tonight." Devin's smirk widened. "You think you have something on me?" he said, his tone mocking. "You have nothing." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the recorder, setting it on the table. He pressed play. Devin's voice filled the air. "You know what I have, Cassie. Do not even think about running." Cassie's eyes went wide, her face draining of color. Devin's smirk faltered, his fingers tightening on his glass. Ethan leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You thought you could control us," he said quietly. "But you underestimated me. And you forgot, there is nothing more dangerous than a man who has nothing left to lose." Devin's face twisted in a snarl. "You will regret this, Ethan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Ethan's eyes were cold, unyielding. "No," he said softly. "You will." The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken around them as Ethan's words hung in the space between them. Cassie's face was pale, her fingers clutched around her glass, so tight he thought it might shatter. Devin's expression had shifted from smug confidence to cold, hard fury. Ethan did not flinch. He pressed play on the recorder again, letting Devin's threats fill the air. "You think you can hide from me, Cassie? You think you can run?" Cassie's eyes glistened with tears as she realized the depth of what Ethan had uncovered. Devin's jaw tightened, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Turn that off," he said. Ethan met his gaze, unblinking. "No, this ends here." For a moment, the silence was absolute. Then Devin leaned back, his smirk creeping back into place. "You think this changes anything?" he sneered. "I have more power than you could ever imagine, Ethan. And if you think I will let you destroy me, you are a fool." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "You are done, Devin," he said. "Your money, your lies, it is all exposed. And you will not hurt my son. You will not hurt anyone else." Cassie's breath hitched, her shoulders shaking. "Ethan, I am so sorry," she whispered. Her voice was a broken thing, the weight of her choices crashing down around her. Devin laughed, cold and sharp. "You are both pathetic," he said. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you are up against." Ethan stood slowly, his gaze never leaving Devin's. "You are the one who has no idea," he said quietly, "because you do not know what it means to fight for family. But I do." And with that, he turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Devin's threats behind him. Cassie hesitated, then followed, her eyes filled with tears. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. The drive home was silent. Cassie sat in the passenger seat, her eyes downcast, her hands twisting in her lap. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel, his jaw set, his mind focused on what came next. When they got home, the house felt different, like the air had shifted, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Cassie sank into the couch, her shoulders slumped. "Ethan, what happens now?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan turned to her, his eyes clear and unyielding. "Now we finish this," he said. Devin is done. I have everything I need to take him down. And you need to decide if you are going to help me or keep pretending. Cassie looked at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. I want to help, she said. I was so scared, Ethan. I thought if I just did what he wanted, it would keep Caleb safe. You let him in, Ethan said quietly. You let him into our lives, into our home. And now I have to clean up your mess. She flinched at his words, but she nodded. I know, she whispered. I will do whatever you need me to do. I need you to know how sorry I am. Ethan took a slow breath. It is too late for sorry, he said. But if you really want to make this right, you will help me finish it. She nodded again, her hands shaking. I will, she said. I promise. Ethan turned away, his mind already turning over the final pieces of the plan. Devin thought he had all the power, but he had underestimated the quiet fury of a man who would do anything to protect his son. And this time, Devin would be the one who paid the price. Later that night, Ethan sat in the dark of the living room, the glow of the streetlights spilling through the window. Cassie sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Ethan, I do not know how to fix this, she said softly. Her voice was a whisper, like she was afraid to break the silence between them. He looked at her, his expression calm but distant. You cannot fix it, he said. But you can tell me everything. No more secrets. She nodded, her fingers twisting together. It started with the money, she said, her voice shaking. Devin promised me. He promised he would make things better for us. I was stupid. I believed him. And then, Ethan asked quietly. Cassie swallowed hard. Then he found out about the mistakes I made before we were together. He used it to control me. I thought if I just did what he said, it would end. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. You thought you could control him, he said. But he was always controlling you. She nodded, her tears falling faster. I know, she whispered. I was so wrong, Ethan. I was so weak. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. Do you understand what is at stake now? He asked. This is not just about us anymore. It is about Caleb, and I will not let you, or Devin, put him in danger. I know, she said, her voice breaking. I will do whatever it takes. I swear it. He watched her, his face unreadable. In that moment, he saw the woman he had once loved, broken, ashamed, but still trying to hold on to the last pieces of what they had been. But it was too late for love. Now, it was about survival, and about justice. The next day dawned sharp and clear, the air crisp with the promise of something final. Ethan stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the quiet street. He felt the weight of it all in his chest, a heavy certainty that today would change everything. He turned as Cassie stepped into the room, her face pale but set. Are you ready? She asked quietly. Ethan nodded. I have been ready, he said. This ends today. They drove in silence to the lawyer's office, a place where the truth would be laid bare, and there would be no more hiding. Ethan held the folder in his hands, the weight of it grounding him. Cassie sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. When they arrived, Lauren was waiting, her expression calm but resolute. Everything is in place, she said as they stepped inside. Once we present this, Devin will have nowhere left to run. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. Then let us finish this, he said. The meeting room was cold and sterile, the walls lined with books and quiet authority. Devin was already there, his eyes glittering with smug defiance. This is a waste of time, he said as they walked in. You think you can scare me with your little threats? Ethan's voice was calm, every word deliberate. This is not a threat, he said. It is the truth, and it is the end for you. Devin's smirk faltered as Lauren laid out the evidence. Every transfer, every secret, every cold fact of his betrayal. Cassie sat silent, her head bowed, her hands shaking. Ethan watched Devin's face pale, the arrogance draining away as the truth closed in around him. And in that moment, Ethan felt no anger, only a quiet, final satisfaction. because this was justice, and it was his to deliver. As the meeting room fell into a tense silence, Devin's face went red, his jaw working as he tried to form words. But the papers Lauren had laid out in front of him left no room for denial. Every transfer, every meeting, every threat, it was all there, and he could see the walls closing in around him. Cassie sat stiffly in her chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She did not dare meet Ethan's gaze, but he saw the tears glistening in her eyes. She had known this day was coming, but the weight of it was crushing her all the same. Devin's smirk finally slipped, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "You think you can ruin me?" he said, his voice a low growl. "You think you can just walk away from this?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression calm and steady. "I am not the one who ruined anything," he said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." Devin's fist clenched, his knuckles white. "You are going to regret this, Ethan," he snarled. "You have no idea who you are dealing with." Ethan's voice was calm but firm. "I know exactly who I am dealing with," he said. "A man who thought he could control everything. A man who forgot that there are some things you can never take, like a father's promise to his son." Lauren's voice cut through the tense silence. "You are finished, Devin," she said, her tone icy. "The court will see this for what it is, and so will everyone else." Devin's shoulders slumped, his fury giving way to the reality of what lay ahead. Ethan watched him closely, feeling a quiet satisfaction in the way the man's bravado crumbled. As they left the meeting room, Cassie paused in the doorway, her voice a shaky whisper. "Ethan, I am so sorry." He looked at her, his gaze steady but distant. "Sorry will not change what happened," he said, "but maybe it can change what comes next." The morning after the confrontation was clear and cold. Ethan woke early, the weight of what he had done pressing heavy on his chest, but also lifting something that had been there for far too long. He sat at the kitchen table, the divorce papers spread out in front of him. The final act in a story that had begun with trust and ended with betrayal. His pen hovered over the line for his signature, and for a moment, he closed his eyes. Cassie entered the kitchen, her steps slow and hesitant. She paused when she saw the papers, her breath catching. "Ethan, is this really what you want?" she asked softly. He looked up at her, his expression calm but resolute. "It is what has to happen," he said. It is done, Cassie." Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not try to argue. She knew the truth as well as he did. There was no fixing what had been broken. She sank into the chair across from him, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I never meant for it to end like this," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said, "but it did. And now, we have to think about Caleb. He deserves better than this." She nodded slowly, her shoulders trembling. "He does," she said. "I want him to know that I love him, that I never stopped." Ethan signed his name, the scratch of the pen loud in the quiet room. He pushed the papers across the table. "Make sure you show him that," he said quietly, "because I will always be here for him, no matter what." Cassie reached for the papers with shaking hands, her tears falling freely now. Ethan stood and walked away, his steps slow but certain. The chapter was closing. There would be no more lies, no more pretending. Outside, the sun rose over the quiet street, casting long shadows that stretched away from the house. Ethan felt them at his back, but he kept moving forward. Because some endings are not about loss. They are about finding your way back to what really matters. Ethan spent the next few days rebuilding the small routines that had once filled their lives with laughter. He woke early to make pancakes with Caleb, the sweet smell of syrup filling the kitchen as his son giggled and reached for the biggest stack. They went to the park, the sun warm on their faces as Caleb raced ahead, his laughter ringing out across the playground. Ethan watched him from a nearby bench, feeling a quiet peace in the way his son's eyes lit up with every new game, every small adventure. At night, they sat together on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background. Caleb leaned against his father's side, his small hand resting on Ethan's arm. "Daddy," he said softly, "are you happy again?" Ethan looked down at his son, his eyes warm. I am getting there, buddy, he said. And as long as you are here with me, I will always be okay. Caleb nodded, his eyes bright. I love you, Daddy, he said. I love you too. Ethan said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. More than anything. As Caleb drifted off to sleep, Ethan watched the slow rise and fall of his son's chest, each breath a promise of the future they were building together. It would not be easy. Nothing about starting over ever was. But he had faced worse battles than this. And he would win this one too. Because for the first time in months, he felt hope. Not for the past, or for the things he could not change, but for the small, bright moments that lay ahead. The laughter of his son, the quiet peace of a home free of lies. And as he turned out the light, he knew that no matter what happened, they would be okay. The days turned into weeks, each one bringing a new kind of peace Ethan had not realized he had missed so much. The house was filled with small sounds, Caleb's laughter, the clink of dishes in the sink, the soft murmur of bedtime stories whispered in the dark. Ethan took comfort in the simple routines. He cooked dinners that filled the kitchen with warmth and light, read stories to Caleb as the boy drifted to sleep, and sat on the porch at night, the stars bright above him. One evening, Mark came by, his easy grin a welcome sight. How are you holding up? He asked as they stood on the porch, the quiet night wrapped around them like a blanket. Ethan nodded slowly, his hands resting on the wooden railing. I am getting there, he said. It is not easy, but it is worth it. Mark clapped him on the shoulder. You did the right thing, brother, he said. Not just for you, for Caleb too. Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes soft. Yeah, he said quietly. For him. Always for him. As Mark left, Ethan turned back to the house, the warm light spilling through the windows. Inside, Caleb was playing with his toys, his laughter echoing through the small rooms. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like the house was a home again. Later, as he tucked Caleb into bed, he leaned down and kissed his son's forehead. Sleep tight, buddy, he said softly. I will always be here. Caleb smiled sleepily, his eyes fluttering closed. I know, Daddy, he mumbled. I know. And in that quiet moment, Ethan felt the wounds inside him begin to heal. Not because the pain was gone, but because he had finally chosen to stop letting it define him. One cool afternoon, Ethan stood in the yard, raking up the last of the autumn leaves. The air was crisp, the sky a soft wash of gold as the sun dipped low. He felt a quiet calm in the simple work, each motion steady and deliberate. A small piece of control in a world that had spun out of his hands too many times. As he gathered the last pile, a car pulled up at the curb. He straightened, his eyes narrowing as he watched the door open. Lauren stepped out, her expression wary but determined. She crossed the yard, her steps quick but careful, her eyes never leaving his. Ethan, she said quietly, can we talk? He set the rake aside, wiping his hands on his jeans. Of course, he said, his voice calm but guarded. They sat on the porch, the low creak of the old boards under them a familiar sound. Lauren took a deep breath, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I wanted to say thank you, she said, for what you did, for helping me see the truth. Ethan nodded slowly. You did not need me to see it, Lauren, he said. You were already there. I just gave you the chance to face it. She looked down, her fingers twisting together. I know, she said softly, but it means something to know I was not alone in this. He was quiet for a moment, the breeze cool against his face. What are you going to do now? He asked. Lauren looked up, her eyes clear. I am going to start over, she said. For me. For my kids. I will not let Devon's shadow touch us anymore. Ethan's lips twitched in a small, tired smile. Good, he said. You deserve better. She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. So do you, Ethan, she said. So do you. And as she walked away, he felt the quiet strength of her words settle in his chest like a promise. One he would keep, for himself and for Caleb. That night, Ethan sat in Caleb's room, the soft glow of the nightlight painting gentle shadows on the walls. Caleb lay curled up in bed, his small form peaceful, his breathing even and deep. Ethan watched him, his heart swelling with love and a fierce protectiveness that would never fade. He smoothed a hand over his son's hair, feeling the warmth of him, the small weight of a life he had sworn to protect no matter what. "You are safe, buddy," he whispered. "I promise you, you will always be safe." Caleb stirred, his eyes opening just enough to see his father. "I love you, Daddy," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "I love you too," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. "Always." As he left the room, he paused in the hallway, the quiet of the house settling around him like a balm. For the first time in months, there were no whispers of betrayal in the shadows, no threats lurking behind every smile. Just the soft, steady heartbeat of a home he had reclaimed. In the kitchen, he poured himself a cup of tea, the steam rising in gentle curls. He sat at the table, his mind turning over the small, stubborn pieces of hope that had begun to grow in the cracks left by Cassie's lies. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. Healing never was. But he was done letting the past define him, done letting other people's choices dictate his future. He looked around the quiet house, feeling the echoes of the life he had fought to protect. And in that moment, he made himself another promise, one as unbreakable as the one he had made to Caleb. No more lies, no more shadows, only the quiet strength of a man who had faced the worst and chosen to stand anyway. The first signs of winter crept in, a soft frost dusting the edges of the yard as Ethan watched Caleb run through the grass, his laughter bright and sharp in the crisp morning air. The sky was wide and blue above them, the cold biting at Ethan's skin but never touching the warmth he felt in his chest. He had taken leave from work to focus on Caleb, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. They spent their days exploring the small joys of the season, hot cocoa in the evenings, long walks through the quiet woods, games of tag that left them breathless with laughter. Cassie still called sometimes, her voice quiet and unsure. She asked about Caleb, about how he was doing, about the small things she had missed. Ethan answered her questions honestly, but without warmth. The trust between them was gone, but he would not keep her from her son. Caleb deserved better than that. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Caleb turned to him, his eyes wide and curious. "Daddy," he said softly, "are we okay now?" Ethan looked at him, his heart twisting at the simple question. He reached out, cupping his son's small face in his hand. "We are okay, buddy," he said. "We are more than okay. We are strong, and we have each other." Caleb smiled, a small, sleepy grin that lit up his whole face. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Ethan said, his voice steady and sure. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside the house was warm, filled with the soft glow of new beginnings. Ethan leaned back, feeling the weight of the past finally begin to lift. He knew there would still be hard days, moments when the memories cut deep and the questions came back. But he also knew that no matter what lay ahead, he would never face it alone. Because in the quiet strength of his son's laughter and the simple peace of their home, he had found something he would never let go of again. And that was enough. The days had grown shorter, the early sunsets turning the sky to a soft blaze of gold and crimson. Ethan sat on the porch one evening, the cold air sharp against his skin, his mind restless. He watched the neighborhood settle into the quiet rhythms of winter, lights flicking on one by one like small beacons in the dark. Cassie had called earlier that day, her voice trembling as she asked to see Caleb. Ethan had agreed, but on his terms, supervised visits only, no more surprises. He owed her that much for the sake of their son, but he would not let her chaos slip back into their lives unchecked. That night, she came to the house, her face pale and drawn. Caleb clung to her when she knelt to hug him, his small arms wrapped around her neck. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart a quiet thud in his chest. "Hi, baby," Cassie whispered, her voice breaking. "I missed you so much." Caleb hugged her tighter, but when he looked at Ethan, his small smile told him everything. He was okay. Stronger, steadier than Ethan had ever hoped. Cassie stood slowly, her eyes meeting Ethan's. "Thank you," she said softly, "for letting me see him." Ethan's face was calm. "He is our son," he said simply. "He deserves to know both of his parents. But he deserves peace more." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I know," she said. "I will not. I will not make this harder for you. Or for him." They stood in that quiet, shared moment. Two people bound by memories and mistakes, but also by the small, bright life they had created together. And as she turned to leave, Ethan felt something shift in the cold air, a quiet understanding that the past had taken enough from them. He would not let it take any more. Snow fell that night, a soft whisper against the windows as Ethan tucked Caleb into bed. The glow of the bedside lamp cast a gentle light across the boy's face, his eyelids fluttering as sleep pulled at him. "Daddy," Caleb mumbled, his voice thick with dreams. "Will Mommy be okay?" Ethan paused, his hand resting on Caleb's small shoulder. "She will find her way," he said quietly. "We all will." Caleb nodded, his breath evening out as he drifted into sleep. Ethan stayed a moment longer, watching his son's peaceful face, the small rise and fall of his chest like a quiet promise. No matter what the world threw at them, they would face it together. Downstairs, the house was quiet, the ticking of the old clock in the living room a steady, comforting sound. Ethan poured himself a glass of water, his mind drifting to the meeting with Lauren and the final steps they had taken to close Devon's chapter for good. The legal papers were signed, the accounts frozen, the last threads of Devon's control cut away. He stood at the window, the snow falling in soft, endless flurries, and felt the weight of it all lift from his shoulders. For so long, he had carried the burden of Cassie's lies and Devon's threats. But tonight, the air felt clean, like the first breath after a storm. When the phone rang, he picked it up on the first ring. It was Lauren. "It is done," she said simply. "Devon is gone. He cannot touch any of us again." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. "Thank you, Lauren," he said. "For everything." She hesitated. "No, Ethan. Thank you. You showed me how to stand up and fight. I will never forget that." He ended the call and sat in the quiet house, his heart steady. Outside, the snow fell on the world he was building for Caleb, one of trust, of quiet mornings and soft laughter, of hope that did not need grand gestures to be real. The new year dawned clear and cold, the first day of January bright with possibility. Ethan woke early, the soft hush of snow muffling the world outside. He lay in bed for a moment, listening to the small sounds of the house, Caleb's breathing in the next room, the low creak of the old floorboards settling into the cold. He rose and padded down the hall to the kitchen, filling the kettle and letting the warmth of the stove chase away the chill. As the steam rose, he thought of everything they had been through, every lie, every betrayal, and felt the quiet strength of what they had built in the aftermath. Cassie called later that morning, her voice soft but sure. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, "for letting me be a part of his life, for not shutting me out completely." Ethan leaned against the counter, his hand wrapped around his mug. "Caleb deserves to know you," he said, "but he deserves stability more. That is what I will give him." Cassie's breath caught, but she did not argue. "I understand," she said. "I hope, someday, you can forgive me. For everything." He was quiet for a moment, the weight of her words settling over him. "I do not know if I can," he said honestly, "but I can move on. And that is enough for me." She was silent for a moment, then whispered, "Thank you, Ethan. Truly." As he ended the call, he looked out at the snow-covered yard, the soft light of morning turning each flake to silver. Caleb came running into the kitchen, his laughter bright and easy. "Daddy, can we go build a snowman?" he asked, his eyes shining. Ethan smiled, his heart steady and whole. Of course, buddy, he said. Let us go make something new. And together, they stepped into the cold morning light, ready to shape their own story, one built on trust, on laughter, and on the quiet promise that no matter what, they would always have each other. The winter sun rose slow and soft over Ethan's quiet street, painting the snow-covered rooftops with warm gold light. In the kitchen, he stood at the stove, flipping pancakes as Caleb chattered beside him about snow forts and sledding. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sweetness of maple syrup, a small comfort in the stillness of morning. Cassie arrived later to pick up Caleb for the weekend, her face calm but a little sad. She stood at the door, her hands folded together. "How is he?" she asked softly. Ethan turned, a faint smile on his face. "He is good. Better every day." His voice was steady, filled with a quiet peace he had earned the hard way. Cassie's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you, Ethan, for giving him this stability, for not letting my mistakes destroy him." Ethan nodded, his gaze soft but unwavering. "That is what he deserves, and it is what I promised him." She reached out, her fingers brushing his arm. "I hope someday we can be friends." "For him. Maybe someday," Ethan said quietly. "For now, let us focus on giving him the love he needs. That is enough." Caleb ran out, his small backpack slung over his shoulders. "Bye, Daddy. I will be back soon, okay?" Ethan crouched down, pulling his son into a warm hug. "Have fun, buddy," he said, his voice full of love. "I will be right here when you get back." As Cassie drove away, Ethan stood in the doorway, watching until they were out of sight. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs. The past was behind him. The weight of lies and betrayal finally set down. Inside, the house was quiet but warm. The laughter of a child still echoed in the walls, a reminder of everything he had fought for. And in that soft winter light, Ethan knew he was ready for whatever came next. The days began to stretch longer, the first hints of spring peeking through the last of winter's snow. Ethan spent his days working on small projects around the house, fixing squeaky hinges, painting the front porch. Each stroke of the brush felt like a small act of rebuilding, of taking back what was his. One evening, as he and Caleb played in the backyard, a small red kite caught the wind. Caleb laughed as it soared into the blue sky, his eyes shining. Ethan watched him, his heart full of a quiet joy he had almost forgotten. Later that night, after Caleb was asleep, Ethan sat on the porch, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders and a cup of tea steaming in his hands. He looked up at the stars, the vast, endless sky stretching above him. He thought of everything he had been through, the lies, the heartbreak, the way he had almost lost himself in the darkness of betrayal. And he realized something simple but true. The past does not have to define you. The choices of others do not have to steal your peace. And no matter how broken things might seem, there is always a way forward if you are brave enough to take it. Ethan smiled, a small, private smile meant just for himself, because he had taken that step, and he was not looking back. As the camera pulls back, the soft music of a new beginning plays, and Ethan's voice echoes in a quiet, final reflection. This story is not just about betrayal. It is about finding your strength, even when the world feels like it is falling apart. It is about knowing that healing is possible, that laughter can still echo in the quietest rooms, and that the future is always brighter than the past. And before the screen fades to black, he asks with a small, hopeful smile, "Tell me, where are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments. And if you felt even a flicker of hope in this story, please like and subscribe. We will meet again in the next epic tale of revenge and redemption. Until then, take care of yourselves, and never forget, no betrayal is stronger than the power of a promise kept." The deep lesson of this story: no matter how deep the lies cut or how heavy the betrayal weighs, there is always a way back to yourself. It is not about erasing the past. It is about finding the strength to rise above it. The real power does not come from seeking revenge or holding on to anger. It comes from choosing to protect what matters most and letting go of everything else. In the end, it is not the pain that defines you. It is the courage to begin again.